The Galaxy S26 Ultra is one incredible slab smartphone, but only if you ignore the spec sheet. Let's go. I usually wait to review my phones because I always think you need to give a phone an extended period of usage before you can give a full appraisal of it. But I've used enough Samsungs to know that something's different here. Like with the Z Fold 7 last year, there seems to be an air of confidence with what Samsung have created, that the usage I've experienced in the last 2 weeks can actually be extended beyond into the rest of my life with this phone. If you were to just review this phone from the spec sheet alone, according to the internet, this phone should pretty much be avoided at all costs. Let's list off the things that this doesn't have on a spec sheet. No pure 10-bit display. No large camera sensors on the back. Not running iOS, so the software is not going to be smooth. No 15,000 milliamp hour silicon carbon battery, so it's not going to last very long. And it's not going to charge fast because it doesn't have 120 watt super fast crazy charging. If you look at the spec sheet, a lot of it reads like a phone from 2 years ago. That's because a lot of them are on the phone from 2 years ago. But this is the problem with a spec sheet. It doesn't tell the complete story. Usage of the phone, that's what makes the difference. Starting with the design, it's probably the element of the spec sheet that you can feel the most. It's the most tactile part of it because it feels every bit as light as the 214 grams that it lists would indicate. And despite its 6.9-inch size, actually sits quite comfortably in the hand because of it, the weight that is. Use this thing for an extended period of time and you have comfort. Because of the fact it's not too heavy, it actually will hold in your hands comfortably for extended usages, at least when you compare it to other flagships of the same size. The spec sheet reads aluminium, not titanium, which might impact durability, but it didn't impact durability before titanium came along, and you won't feel it in your hand. But that's something that can probably be updated as time goes on, because as of now, I've had no issues. The display is probably the biggest part of the spec sheet where you look at and think, no thanks. But it is a big part of the phone experience because the first thing you do when you pick up your phone is you look at the display. This is where, with all of the controversy that's gone on, you could be lulled into thinking that the display is awful, that it's a downgrade, and it's just going to be bad to use. And that just isn't the case. Looking back at your own photos that you've taken, watching content on the screen, or just interacting with oneui, you have absolutely no issues with the display, and it's actually really nice to look at. And then when you don't want other people to see what you're looking at, you can turn on privacy display. It doesn't really impact your viewing experience too much. Like, yes, there is an obvious hit, but it's literally turning off pixels so other people can't see your screen. And it is honestly magic to see it working in real time. You're never going to be viewing your smartphone display under a microscope. So anything about text being less sharp is being way overblown because no one is getting a microscope out and looking at the text on a screen. You're looking at it from a regular viewing angle, and from that point of view, it's crisp, it's sharp, and bright and colorful. Even without that native 10-bit panel that everyone thought was there, it's still great. Samsung have clarified, and I actually kind of remember this faintly, that they never explicitly said the panel is 10-bit. It is outputting a 10-bit equivalent thanks to a process they're calling MNDIE, which is backed by a custom processor and something they're calling Pro Upscaler. It effectively gives you 10-bit color depth without actually needing a 10-bit panel. It's marketing, sure, but if the end result is the same, why are we looking at a spec sheet and focusing on the fact it's got 16 million colors when its output is actually a lot higher? Call me a shill, call me a bootlicker, whatever. I have eyes and I know what they tell me, and they tell me that this display is great in any lighting condition. Factor in the fact it still has the best-in-class anti-reflective coating of current phones. I would say the S25 Ultra is not current anymore, and it pretty much just completes the entire experience. Oh, and a return to ultrasonic fingerprint scanner for me has been very welcomed. Something else my eyes are telling me is that the cameras are really great to use. Exciting even. There have been some amazing quality of life additions to the setup of the Galaxy S26 Ultra's cameras. I definitely feel a lot more confident in taking photos of my son at football. The f1.4 aperture is just allowing for the shutter speed to be ever so slightly quicker, which is reducing the motion blur of movement. And then that inclusion of the 24 megapixel as a default option within Camera Assistant just means I'm getting the same dynamic range, the same contrast, the same colors, but with that extra bump of sharpness. It's probably what was missing from the S25 Ultra's cameras is that bump in resolution of the default option. Now, before you say you've got 50 megapixel and you've got 200, it's not the same thing, because with those resolutions, there is a noticeable change in how Samsung process the photos, and there's also a noticeable shift in the options down the bottom. With the 50 megapixel and 200 megapixel, you can only use the ultra wide, the 1 and the 5, and it explicitly removes the 3 times and the 10 times crop as an option. With 24 megapixel, it's just the new default. It keeps all those extra options there, and it just scales down as it needs to. But the biggest change probably to the overall feel of the camera from a photos point of view is the processing. Samsung don't appear to be crushing shadows so much anymore in their photos, and everything's kind of got this nice bright lift whilst maintaining its visually aesthetic appeal of contrast and color. They're not this dark and moody photo anymore. It's still light and bright, but with that same aesthetic as before. Taken a lot of photos, and definitely of all the cameras I've tested around it, this is by far my favorite. I was gutted to lose the minimum focus distance of the 5x camera, because that was something I like to use a lot, especially for product shots, being a YouTuber. It's a small sacrifice I'm gonna have to make to not have it anymore. The f1.4 aperture of the main camera does give me a nice depth of field with close-ups, so I might have to rely on that a little bit more, but it's still a great 5x camera for that longer range zoom, and it's just a trade-off I'm going to have to accept because I do like everything else around it. But I think the aspect of this camera that I'm most excited by is the video that I've been using. The APV codec has truly transformed how I view this as a video option. I'm not the best when it comes to knowing much about video. Cameras, as much as they give you great output, like this is the Sony a6-700 now, I get scared by the settings menus and the toggles and all the options because they're very convoluted and complicated. The APV codec has simplified the whole process down for me. Especially that pipeline that Samsung created has made every step of the process way easier. The settings menu for it is very simple and easy to understand, and the inclusion of the inbuilt LUTs, whether it be LUT preview for log or whether you go in and edit afterwards, just means that the whole thing can be done on the phone and you don't need a degree in videography to be able to figure it out. And then you also don't need extra hardware. You don't need to export this onto a laptop or a PC to be able to add in a LUT and edit it. All the color grading, all the exporting can be done here. The other element of the hardware that I really like with video is the horizontal lock feature. I'm not going to pretend that that has been something that Samsung created. Certainly has been seen on other phones, but I think the way Samsung have brought it in here has made it really fun to use. Not only do you have the resolution options, but it is part of the Super Steady suite of features. It has made filming sports content for my son, who trains a lot for football, so easy. Especially sometimes it might be easier as you're sort of following them along to flip the phone into portrait as opposed to landscape, and then it's still locked onto that horizontal line and keeps it in the landscape anyway. But even without all of those software features, the actual video quality has just improved. Samsung seem to have done some processing work here, probably down to the 8th Gen Elite 5 for Galaxy, that's given all the videos and overall processing and lift when you're looking at it back later. I love using it. But a phone's hardware is only as good as the software, and I love using oneui 8.5. Shock. For me, Samsung with this software has pretty much become almost on par with iOS levels of fluidity. Almost. Apple still have the hold in a lot of scenarios. But what it has on top of Apple is functional features that I love to use. But with some of the One UI features that Samsung bring in, you don't always take to them straight away. Sometimes you need to remember that they're there to be able to take advantage of it. But that's where features like Now Nudges, you don't really have to go searching for it. It just is part of the software. So anytime you get a text message, it's working to be able to find the thing that's being asked for and brings it to the surface automatically. But I've become so entrenched in One UI. Edge panels has become part of my daily usage of a phone. The gallery, with all of its features and how it operates, I'm so accustomed to. And with the new One UI 8.5 visual, it kind of gives me a nice aesthetic to look at as well. Or Samsung Internet, that is just getting better and better as time goes on. The new features eventually will make their way into the rotation. Like one of the newest ones that I've started to use a lot more because it's just so easy is the generative edit with the text field. Being able to change a photo with just a text prompt is so easy, and to be able to do it natively on the gallery without needing a third-party service to activate it is also so easy. Another one that I can really see myself using in the future as time goes on is the Creative Studio, where I can go in here and create greeting cards and birthday cards and invitations. My daughter's birthday's coming up, so I can create invitations, I can create cards. All of that can be done in that Creative Studio, and it looks like it'll be a lot of fun to do as well. One UI just kind of feels fun again. Samsung have brought in a lot of customization touches, like the new Quick Panel, which is completely customizable, even if it's just a lift of the iOS control center. And then Good Lock on top of all of that, which keeps the animations feeling fast and fresh and the whole phone has a nice fresh peel about it, and you can go and change things as you need to. And with all of this usage in the last 2 weeks, I've been able to put the battery to the test. And despite that spec sheet number of 5,000 milliamp hours in capacity, it is holding up. I don't know whether it's down to the new efficient display that's in here or the optimizations from the new chip, but there's a lot of great work being done here with the battery and its endurance. I am genuinely impressed with the lasting capabilities of this phone, and I think a lot of you will be as well. I'm consistently getting about a day and a half, and whether or not screen on time is high or low, the standby time is what's helping you get there. In that comparison I did against the 17 Pro Max earlier on, the standby time overnight, the Samsung lost 3% over the course of 6 to 7 hours. Those numbers again. And the iPhone lost about 9 or 10. Drastic difference in standby time, and it just extends your usage out. Like right now, I've got my battery, it's at 86%, and I've used over an hour and a half of screen on time, and it's been off charge for about 3 hours and 30 minutes. That is estimating me another day and 2 hours left of usage. The great thing is not having to charge it overnight is with the new 60-watt charging option, it's going to charge up very, very fast. In my tests so far with it compared to other phones, it starts behind and ends up in front and finishes before them. That's a weird way of saying that. The new chip is powerful too, and I think you're getting to a point now where every year you're going to say the same thing, the new chip is powerful. But what this new chip allows for from a creative side of things is that APV codec, which is giving export times and the whole creative workflow a massive boost in efficiency. That export really shows like the raw performance that this thing is capable of. I don't really game much. When I do, it's usually just to film myself gaming so I can show you guys that the phone can game. Other than that, the phone performs exceptionally well, especially for things that I use it for, which is like Samsung Dex and all my work-related stuff. And that's the thing, it still has all of those stuff that I've spoken about and still has things like Samsung Dex. Still includes the S Pen, which by now is a very known commodity in the Samsung world, so I don't really have to go into too much detail about how it is to use. The fact it still has this though, despite slimming the body down and making it lighter, you've got to give props to that. And then it connects to the wider Samsung ecosystem, which Samsung have. It's not like this is a phone that's just on its own. It is supported by an ecosystem, but that's where just having the phone, it actually still holds up on itself. It's a weird way of saying it as well, because you don't need to have the ecosystem for this to operate exceptionally. You can just use this by itself and use other things, and the phone will still excel. Phones can always be improved by hardware. So Samsung could obviously do things to this phone which give it a better, appeal, especially again on a spec sheet. But to just focus on the hardware and look at the sheet with numbers on it really doesn't do this thing justice. If that's all your focus is and you ignore it because of it, you're going to miss out on a pretty incredible, some would say ultra experience. There are better hardware phones out there. Absolutely. I'm trying to get my hands on a Xiaomi 17 Ultra at the moment, and there might be phones with more polished software. iOS is certainly software that someone can point to and say, oh, the software is more fleshed out, it's more polished. But I think, again, Samsung proved their point that to make an Ultra phone, you don't necessarily need the Ultra specs. There needs to be a balance between the two. And by two, I mean specs and software, and experience, probably 3. And for me, there's been no better example of that than this phone. This could be a really good platform for Samsung to build on into the future, because if they can do this with this hardware, I'm excited to see when silicon carbon comes in, how much better this can actually be. But for now, I'm going to enjoy this over the next 12 months because it's a lot of fun to use and there's a lot to love. Just ignore the specs and go off vibes. Hit subscribe to Tech with Benefits. More content like this, more comparisons coming up as well. The S26 Ultra train is not stopping, so you don't want to miss it. I'll see you guys in the next one. You!